Hi, this is Mental Mike. Thank you so much for being here. This is podcast number 3. Just a quick note about these podcasts as I'm going through this and I'm gaining experience and I'm learning more about this. I'll listen to these and then I'll have a conversation with a client. This particular podcast that you're getting ready to listen to was the result of treatment that I provided to a nurse who had a kratom dependency and swore up and down that she was able to perform better as a nurse, work longer hours, and provide better service and care for her patients as a result of her dependency on this drug. And it was very, very difficult for me to break through this exterior shell of hers that she was hiding behind in justifying her need to actually use this drug to provide better medical care. So I've changed a little bit the stage is set up, and I've tried to use the tools that I have available for me to use to help to explain this process in a little bit more detail in case somebody listening is using the same kind of adaptive behavior in order to be able to handle their world and the expectations that others have for them. Because you don't have to become dependent on a substance in order to please others. You don't have to become dependent on a substance in order to meet the expectation level that you have for yourself that may be too high at times. There's other issues that are undermining your ability to just be happy and content and successful in what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And those underlying conditions are the things that you're using to justify your consumption of a chemical that interferes with the natural flow of energy within your body and your health. And that's what we need to get to. So please listen to this conversation for additional details. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. We're starting a really important discussion today. For so many of us, maybe personally, maybe for people we love, addiction and alcohol issues, well, they're not simple. They're incredibly complex, right?
Absolutely. They touch so many lives so deeply.
And often the way we talk about them, focusing on moral failure or just chasing highs, it just doesn't capture the reality. It can be really destructive, actually.
It misses the core of the struggle for many people.
So today, our mission really is to try and reframe that initial pull towards addictive behaviors. We're exploring this idea that it's often less about seeking pleasure and more about a desperate search for wholeness, relief from something painful inside.
Precisely. Finding some kind of temporary peace.
And we're drawing heavily on insights from the Unified Flux Model. You might hear us call it the UFM. It's a framework developed by a theorist known as Mental Mike.
Yes. The UFM offers a really different lens on this.
It really does. Mental Mike looks at that first moment, that first time a substance or a behavior just seems to click, and suggests something pretty startling. He says that initial hook isn't usually about feeling good or finding joy. It's more like silencing static, quieting some internal tension, or maybe this unbearable feeling of being disconnected.
That distinction is absolute fundamental. It's key to the UFM's perspective, and honestly, it changes the whole conversation around addiction.
How so? Because
that first experience, the one that really sets the hook, it's almost always about feeling less bad, not necessarily about euphoria.
Less bad.
Think about it. If your baseline state is feeling fragmented or anxious or just empty, the substance doesn't suddenly fill you with overwhelming joy. What it does is provide a momentary truce.
A truce with the internal chaos.
Exactly. It makes that feeling of disconnection, that pain, just tolerable, even if only for a little while. It numbs the bad rather than creating genuine good.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit more, because if that first hit is relief, there's a deception there, isn't there? Mental Mike talks about this concept of borrowed energy.
Borrowed energy, that's a core idea.
It feels like you found something real, something integrating, but actually, you're essentially taking out a massive loan against your future well-being, your future ability to feel okay naturally.
That's a perfect analogy. A high-interest loan is exactly right. And the major consequence of relying on this borrowed energy, the original pain, that internal static that pushed you towards the substance in the first place,
it doesn't go away.
It never resolves. In fact, once the effects wear off, it usually surges back even stronger. And often it brings friends withdrawal, guilt, shame.
Oh, wow. So it compounds the problem.
Massively.
Yeah.
And that creates what Mental Mike calls the cruel paradox of addiction.
Which is?
The very thing that gave you that temporary escape, that brief relief, it becomes the primary source of more suffering. The solution literally becomes a bigger problem.
Making the original disconnection even worse.
Deeper and wider. Yeah. The gap between who you are or who you want to be and the reality of your situation just grows. And the UFM points out, this isn't random. It follows a pretty predictable pattern of deterioration.
Right. Can you walk us through those stages? Because I think understanding that slow slide from what feels like a choice to something that feels like necessity, that's crucial for people listening.
Absolutely. The Unified Flux Model maps this out quite clearly into 3 phases. First, there's what's called the enhancement period.
Okay, the honeymoon phase, maybe.
Kinda, yeah. This is where the person feels like they've stumbled onto a secret weapon, a superpower. Maybe the substance makes them feel more confident socially, less anxious.
Or helps them cope with a stressful job, perhaps.
Exactly. It might suppress anxiety, make boring tasks tolerable. It genuinely feels like it's enhancing their life. It's masking underlying issues, perhaps, but it feels like an improvement.
And the downsides, the costs.
At this stage, they seem minimal, or at least they're easy to ignore or rationalize away. It helps me function. I deserve this.
Go, it feels functional. It's solving a problem, making the trade-off seem totally worth it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It works initially. But then there's a shift. It can be subtle, but it's profound. You move into the second stage, the maintenance period.
Maintenance. Okay, what changes?
Here's the key difference. The substance isn't primarily used to feel better anymore. It's needed just to feel normal, or maybe just to avoid feeling awful.
So it's about avoiding the negative, not seeking the positive.
Right. The brain and body have adapted. They expect the substance now. Without it, the baseline anxiety might be way worse than before you started. Irritability kicks in, maybe depression. The whole system is operating at a deficit without the external input.
That sounds terrifying, realizing you're now tied to the thing you thought was setting you free.
It is terrifying.
Yeah.
And that realization often deepens the sense of being trapped, disconnected, which unfortunately locks the cycle into the third stage, necessity.
Necessity. So choices, gone.
Functionally, yes, or it's severely compromised.
Yeah.
At this point, the brain has actively downregulated its own natural production of feel-good chemicals. Think dopamine, serotonin, endorphins.
So the internal pharmacy shuts down.
Pretty much. That high-interest loan we talked about, the bill comes due. Your natural capacity for pleasure, motivation, feeling okay, it's suppressed.
Wow.
So what started as maybe a choice to feel a bit better or less bad, it becomes a neurological imperative.
Yeah.
You need the substance just to stop the system from crashing into agony, intense withdrawal, crushing dysphoria.
And Mental Mike emphasizes that this growing gap between your values, who you want to be, and this compulsive behavior that just digs the hole of disconnection deeper, right? Seals the cycle.
Exactly. It fuels the shame and the isolation.
Okay, this is where, for me, it gets really, really interesting. Because if the consequences are piling up, jobs lost, relationships destroyed, health failing, financial ruin, why? Why does the person keep going? From the outside, it looks completely irrational.
It looks like self-destruction.
But the UFM argues this isn't about a lack of willpower, is it? It's something much deeper, biological.
It is. It's a profound neurological hijacking. Chronic substance use literally rewires the brain. It physically changes it.
How? What parts are affected?
Well, several key areas. We see significant impairment in the prefrontal cortex, the PFC. That's like the brain's CEO. Decision-making, planning, impulse control, all of that. Your ability to weigh long-term consequences versus short-term urges, that gets seriously damaged. You essentially lose your brakes.
So the capacity for logical, future-focused thinking is literally compromised.
It really is. At the same time, another area, the amygdala, which is involved in processing fear, stress, threats, it becomes hyperactive, overly sensitive. Meaning the person is often living in a state of constant low-grade or sometimes high-grade fear and stress. Their internal world feels chaotic. The external world feels threatening. Hypervigilance.
Okay, so impaired judgment and heightened fear. That's a tough combination.
A very tough combination. And then add to that the changes in the nucleus accumbens. This is a central part of the brain's reward pathway.
Right, the pleasure center stuff.
Sort of, but it's more complex. What happens is it becomes hyper-responsive to drug-related cues. Seeing paraphernalia, being in a certain place, even thinking about it, can trigger intense craving. But, and this is crucial, it becomes hyper-responsive to natural rewards.
Meaning everyday pleasures just don't register anymore.
Exactly. The satisfaction of finishing a project, the warmth of connection with a loved one, enjoying a beautiful day. The brain's reward system barely notices them. Only the substance reliably lights it up.
So wait, if the PFC is that impaired, does that mean free will just vanishes completely? Or is there still some element of choice left?
That's a critical question. Mental Mike, drawing on the UFM, is quite clear. Free will is compromised, sometimes severely, but it's probably not absolute zero in most cases. There's usually some flicker of agency left.
But it's fighting an uphill biological battle.
A massive one. The neurological deck is heavily stacked against stopping. Continuing to use, despite the wreckage, actually makes a kind of grim biological sense to that altered brain structure. Because the alternative stopping, facing withdrawal, confronting the underlying pain without the chemical coping mechanism, feels utterly terrifying.
Like an existential threat.
Yes. The addiction feels necessary for survival, even as it destroys you. Confronting it can feel like confronting death itself.
Which leads us perfectly to maybe the most powerful idea in the UFM. Reframing addiction not as a moral failing, but as something adaptive.
Yes. If we can let go of the blame and shame framework, even for a moment, and focus instead on why the behavior started, the UFM views addiction as fundamentally an adaptive survival mechanism.
Survival
A
mechanism.
highly functional, albeit destructive strategy the system adopts to try and regulate itself when it's internally fragmented. Maybe due to trauma, loss, chronic unbearable stress. It's a way the organism tries to compensate for a deep misalignment within the self.
That shifts the perspective entirely. It connects to how our nervous system typically responds to threat, right? Fight, flight, freeze.
Or fawn, yeah. Those are the standard survival responses. But what if those don't work? What if the threat isn't external, but internal, like pervasive anxiety or deep emotional numbness from neglect, and fighting or fleeing isn't possible?
Then what?
Then, Mental Mike suggests, substances or addictive behaviors can offer a kind of fifth option.
A fifth option? Like what?
Like instantly numbing the pain, escaping the unbearable internal state, artificially shifting your state when nothing else seems to work. And crucially, this often isn't a conscious, carefully considered choice. It can be almost automatic, instinctual, the system reaching for anything that offers relief.
Can you give an example? The UFM uses one about childhood neglect, right?
Yes, it's a powerful illustration. Imagine someone grows up with chronic emotional neglect. They never develop the internal skills, the scaffolding, to manage strong emotions or feel securely connected. They might feel constantly unsafe, disconnected, hypervigilant inside. Then, maybe as a teen or young adult, they encounter a substance. And suddenly, miraculously, that relentless internal noise goes quiet. They feel a sense of calm, maybe even safety, that they've literally never experienced before.
Wow. It feels like medicine.
It feels like grace. It allows them, finally, to regulate feelings they never learned how to manage naturally. In that context, the substance is functional. It was the best solution their system could find in that moment to survive an internal storm.
Okay. So, if addiction is often this adaptive response to deep pain or fragmentation, what does that tell us about recovery? About real healing?
It tells us something profoundly important.
Which is?
You cannot just rip away someone's primary survival strategy, even a destructive one, without offering something viable in its place.
Right. That makes total sense.
The UFM emphasizes this. Simply demanding abstinence, telling someone just stop, is often like taking away crutches from someone whose leg hasn't healed yet.
We'll just fall. Or find another, maybe worse, crutch.
Exactly. They likely lack the internal resources, the emotional regulation skills, the self-soothing capacity, the healthy connections to manage the overwhelming flood of pain, anxiety, trauma memories, or emptiness that rushes in when the substance is removed. Relapse becomes almost inevitable, not because they're weak, but because they lack the tools.
So the real work, according to the Unified Flux Model, has to go way beyond just stopping the substance or behavior. It's about rebuilding.
It's about deep repair and reconnection, making the addiction unnecessary by addressing the reasons it arose.
And how does the UFM suggest we do that? What are the key elements?
It really boils down to three core pillars, non-negotiables for lasting recovery. First, consciously building new, healthy survival strategies. This means developing robust emotional regulation skills, stress tolerance, ways to self-soothe that don't involve harming yourself.
Okay, building internal tools.
Second, actively restoring missing connections. This is huge. Connection to a coherent sense of self, understanding who you are beneath the addiction, connection to other people's safe, supportive community, and connection to something larger than yourself, meaning, purpose, value in life.
Self, others, meaning. Got it.
And third, gently but directly confronting and starting to integrate the underlying wounds. The trauma, the losses, the developmental deficits that made the substance feel necessary in the first place. You have to heal the original injury, not just manage the symptom.
So it's systemic work, addressing the whole person, the whole system.
Absolutely. That's how you stop relying on borrowed energy. You replace it with sustainable, authentic sources of well-being and fulfillment. You heal the fragmentation that drove the need for escape.
This has been incredibly clarifying, a really powerful way to understand the immense weight, the physiological and psychological reality of this struggle. Let's try to sum up the core insights for everyone listening.
Okay.
From our discussion today, drawing on Mental Mike and the UFM, addiction isn't just hedonism or moral failure. It's often a deeply misguided, unconscious quest for wholeness or relief.
Driven by the deceptive allure of borrowed energy.
Which ultimately makes things worse. And it's rooted in real adaptive biological changes in the brain. It's a survival mechanism gone awry.
Making recovery not just about stopping, but about profound systemic reconnection.
Connection to self, others, and purpose. Building new coping skills. Healing old wounds.
Exactly.
So maybe a final thought for our listeners based on all this.
I think if we take this UFM perspective seriously, if the root problem really is disconnection, fragmentation, trying to survive unbearable internal states, then perhaps the most radical, powerful first step towards genuine recovery is self-compassion.
Compassion for the part of you.
Or the part of someone you love that adopted this strategy simply because it was trying its absolute best to survive. It didn't know another way. Understanding that can shift everything.
Instead of judgment, understand.
Yes. And from that place of understanding, maybe ask yourself, or gently encourage someone else to ask, what's one small step you can take today toward a source of sustainable, unborrowed energy? What offers genuine connection or creativity or service or peace, even for a moment, that doesn't come with that crushing hidden cost? Finding those authentic sources, that's the beginning of the journey back to wholeness.
My name's Elena. I'm 34 years old. I got 2 kids. And for a long time, I kept telling myself I was handling everything. That was kind of my thing. Handle it, push through, don't complain, don't need anybody. Even when everything inside me felt completely fried. I started taking prescription pills after a surgery a few years back. At first, it honestly felt like somebody had finally turned the volume down in my head. That's the only way I know how to explain it. It wasn't even about getting high. It was relief. Relief from anxiety, relief from pressure, relief from feeling like I was constantly about to fall apart while pretending I had everything together. And that's what hit me listening to this podcast. When they talked about addiction not being about pleasure for a lot of people, but about trying to silence internal chaos, that landed hard for me. Because I never related to those stereotypes people throw around about addiction. I wasn't partying. I wasn't trying to destroy my life. I was trying to survive my life. There's a difference. But then slowly, the thing that helped me survive started becoming the thing destroying me. And that part happened so gradually I almost didn't notice it. At first, the pills made me feel functional, more patient, less overwhelmed, like I could finally breathe. Then eventually I needed them just to feel normal. Then eventually I needed them because without them, my whole body and mind felt like they were collapsing in on themselves. That part terrified me, especially because I was still trying to be everybody's strong person while secretly falling apart in private. I remember sitting in my bathroom one night after my kids went to sleep, staring at myself in the mirror thinking, how did I become this person? And honestly, the shame was unbearable. That's why this idea from the podcast about borrowed energy hit me so hard. Because that's exactly what it felt like. Like I had borrowed peace from the future, borrowed calm, borrowed stability, and eventually the bill came due with interest. The anxiety got worse, the exhaustion got worse, the self-hatred got worse. And then hearing them explain how addiction can actually become your nervous system's survival strategy, that changed something for me. Because I always thought my addiction meant I was weak or selfish or broken somehow. But hearing it described as adaptation, like my brain and body were trying to protect me the only way they knew how. I don't know. For the first time, I felt something besides shame. I felt sad for myself. And honestly, that was weird. I've spent most of my life being hard on myself. So even allowing myself to think, maybe I wasn't evil, maybe I was overwhelmed, maybe I was hurting, that felt uncomfortable, but also kind of freeing. I still have a long way to go. I still catch myself wanting escape when life gets heavy. I still get scared sometimes thinking about who I became during the worst parts of my addiction. But I'm starting to understand something now. Recovery isn't just removing substances. It's learning how to live without needing to disappear from yourself all the time. And maybe that's what healing actually is. Not becoming somebody perfect. Just becoming somebody honest enough to stay present in their own life again.